So hello everyone and welcome to our virtual event today for the World Biodiversity Forum. We'll be discussing food, culture, biodiversity, and viewing the public launch of the Tealeaves documentary, In Good Taste. I'm Carly Williams, and I am joined today by my co-filmmaker, Natalie Atala, in hosting this event. We are the directors and editors of the documentary. Before we dive into the conversation, I would like to provide a bit of context for what we are about to embark on, and also take the opportunity to introduce our very special guests that have dedicated their time to be here today and share their expertise. So for the past several years, Tealeaves has been on a journey to make our fourth documentary. This one focuses on the concept of taste. When we filmed our first interviews with members of Google Foods Lab back in April of 2019, we sought to answer questions about consumer choice, and we had a hypothesis. We hypothesized that our tastes impact our decisions, and those very decisions have an outsized effect on our health and the health of the planet. We spoke to medical doctors, foragers, conservation scientists. We also spoke with chefs, design educators, and anthropologists. All of them helped us get to the fact that taste is social. It's formed by both our physical experience as well as our cultural understandings. And to change taste, we must challenge both. We must look to traditional knowledge keepers, to indigenous people, to immigrant communities and other marginalized groups that are using food to share their histories, cultures, traditions, and practices. And our film is a display of our current hypothesis. The solution to our food system is one part biodiversity and one part cultural diversity. One of the most startling facts that we learned at the beginning of this journey, we learned at the World Biodiversity Forum when we attended it in Davos last year. We learned that 75% of the world's food is generated from 12 plant species and 5 animals. This startling fact, along with the entire forum, sparked urgency and inspiration and propelled the film forward. And so it is really just such an honor to get to launch it publicly here today. It also gives me great pleasure to introduce our special guests for today's conversations. I'll introduce them each briefly so that we have enough time to really hear their learnings and perspectives, and we'll post their complete bios in the chat. Dr. Dory Tunstall is a design anthropologist, public intellectual, and design advocate who works at the intersections of critical theory, culture, and diversity. She's currently the Dean of Design at Ontario College of Art and Design University, OCAD. Josefa Carino-Talley is an indigenous Ibalo Kankanae Igorot youth from Cordillera, Philippines. She has served as co-coordinator of Global Youth Biodiversity Network's Southeast Asia since 2018 and has been actively advocating for indigenous people's issues and meaningful and effective youth participation within and for GYBN since becoming a member. Michael Bacher, MS, MBA, is Vice President of Global Workplace Programs for Real Estate and Workplace Services, Google's renowned workplace programs and services, such as food, transportations, events, sustainability, fitness, and well-being. He is very involved in the ever-evolving intersection of food, health, and sustainability through various roles in organizations, such as the Culinary Institute of America's Menus of Change Business Leadership Council, the EAT Forum Advisory Board, and the Yale School of Management Center for Customer Insights Advisory Board. Thank you, Dr. Dory, Josefa, and Michael for being with us today. Just before we transition into the conversation, we're going to share the film trailer. We'll all watch it together, after which I will turn the conversation over to my co-director, Natalie Atala. Thank you.
Thank you, Carly, and thank you, Dory, Michael, and Sefa for being here. I'm very excited to preface the viewing of the documentary by this conversation. So for the first question, I'd love to address it to all of you. And if we can start by talking about the connection between food, culture, and biodiversity, and why diversity in food choices is important both culturally and environmentally.
I can start out first. We are what we eat, and when we say we, not just as individuals, but as a collective, and not just as a collective of people, but a collective of people and the environments and the things that we use in order to feed ourselves and also feed the system of the things that we need require to feed ourselves, right? So those are all so deeply intertwined with one another. And so if we have diversity in what it is that we eat, first of all, it allows us greater modalities of expression in terms of who we are and what matters to us. It provides us with different modalities of relationship that we build to the land and the water and the plants and the animals that, again, we're part of a network of support and obligation to. And so if we narrow, as we have, right, if we've narrowed our choices, if we're growing things in environments that are not appropriate for the things that are being grown because we've acquired a taste for strawberries in an area and their strawberries aren't native, right? Then we create lots of challenges both for the environment, we create lots of challenges for our health. And again, we create these unsustainable systems of transportation and pollution. And because we've cultivated a very narrow taste.
Maybe from my perspective, you are what you eat and you eat who you are. And I think as we're becoming, more focused on who we are with our heritage, I think almost immediately you're going to get the question of, so what will you get to eat? And I think what you get to eat is driven as well by the availability. And I think our food context plays a big role in this as well. And then last but not least, regardless of how much we think we ultimately make our own choices, it is the culture, it is the broader ecosystem. So it all comes together. And I think when you think about our future, it is so important that I think, one, we celebrate the diversity of thought, the diversity of just our culture, but we have to celebrate and actually build upon the diversity of our food system as well. And I think we have opportunities there. So it's, to me, you cannot just look at one and not think about the other. Safa.
Yeah, I completely agree with what both of you said, and maybe just kind of to add that food systems are such an important part of transitioning to the future that we want of living in harmony with nature. First, like very concretely, because with more food diversity, we can, get better nutrition, better health, better well-being. I think a really big challenge of today is that we're kind of transitioning to these highly processed foods that might be preferred because of access or because of convenience, but it's not necessarily like doesn't have to do much with how healthy these foods are or how ethically they were sourced. But more than diet, food is also so much more than that. It's like it's culture, it's values, it's economy, it's policy. But also, like something I wanted to point out is that the food and agricultural system is kind of one of the biggest drivers of biodiversity loss, of pollution, of land use change, and it's contributing so much to kind of further loss of food sovereignty for local people. It's causing the industrial food industry is causing loss of lands, loss of health, loss of livelihoods, and so kind of that I think shows a lot of how much all of these very big systems and all these very big challenges that the world is facing is connected to food, but also to culture and to nature.
Maybe one more element, Safa, to build upon that. I think it's the diversity of considerations as well, because I think at times within the food system we become very focused on whether it's sustainability, or access. But I think celebrating the diversity of perspectives on what it is we're trying to solve for, and understand that some of the solutions we have might go in a slightly different direction, might still lead longer term to a more sustainable ecosystem for all. So it's the diversity of thought in the space about diversity as well.
Thank you, Michael, Safa, and Dory for answering this. And I think the next question I'd love to address to Dory, but obviously everyone feel free to also answer that question. So what are the detrimental impacts of monoculture, originally designed to increase efficiency in food production, and how is it connected to cultural diversity?
Well, Seifa began to answer that in some way, so I'll echo response. One of the things that was one of the shocking moments when I was studying physical anthropology was the fact that they actually found, again, we've identified the moment in which we've moved from like sort of agriculture, and that there was actually a marked increase in health problems that they've actually been able to find in the fossil structure when we move to that system, right? And again, moving to this system was one about efficiency, one about control. So at the same time, you have the rise of city-states, which begins to set up structures of hierarchy and exploitation. You have, again, the loss of land, because you begin to see the establishment of what we refer to now as more plantation systems, again, which then increases warfare, because you require other people to work those lands. So even going back as far as like the origins of agriculture in many ways, that desire to control the land, to control the use of water, to control the people who work the land, have all set up this system of, again, unsustainability that has just become accelerated today. And again, all of that process of control, right, is reducing, I think, again, the numbers of considerations, right? The number of considerations, you begin to see the hierarchy. Only those who are of the priestly class can eat these certain foods. Those who are of the peasant class can eat these certain foods. And so there's a way in which that desire for control, that desire for efficiency, the desire for exporting, all have that moment into agriculture is that moment where we've literally planted to the seed of a lot of the structural, social, environmental inequalities that again have just been exacerbated today. And again, with reduced health outcomes and reduced social cohesion, and with reduced biodiversity, which means the earth itself is not able to as well replenish itself and regenerate itself when there is damage.
I think that actually leads us to, Safa, I would love to kind of have you talk about the ways that biodiversity and our food system are related, and how this also affects our tastes and impact on the world.
Yeah. So we had a lot of good points on this already, but I wanted to kind of add that this discussion on taste is something that's really interesting for me. Taste is kind of not very easy to define, but I think it plays a lot into this issue of biodiversity. Just kind of as an example, there was a recent landmark report, the IPBES Global Assessment, right? That basically told us that we're losing biodiversity at such an unprecedented rate. But it also gives a very important point that kind of, if we want to solve this biodiversity crisis, that we need like very transformative, profound changes in our systems. And in this report, they also kind of point out different leverage points to reach this transformative change. And one of them that they point out is diverse visions of a good life. And I think that has so much to do with taste. Because I think what's really frustrating is that so many people still define having a good life in terms of how much we can buy, how lavishly we can live, how much things we can own. But really, like, so many people, and many of indigenous peoples and local communities have been living well with so much less stuff, but with so much more in terms of like how healthy they are, how good their relationships are, how they're able to help their community and contribute to their community. And I think this kind of touches upon the really profound effect that our tastes, our perceptions of what is good and what is a good life, kind of impact the way we consume in this world, and including like the way we consume and produce food. And I'll stop there for now.
No, that's such a wonderful answer, Sefa. Thank you so much. And I'd love to maybe continue along those lines. If Dory or Michael, you wanted to add anything to this. Or I can jump.
I was adding space for Michael, but I think that the notion that there needs to be diversity in their perspectives of what is a good life is a really, really important one. And I think looking to, in many ways, simplify what is important, which we're learning, right, in this pandemic. Like, what's really important is the relationships that we have to people. What is really important is the community that we build, the way we support each other's health, the way in which we support each other's boundaries in some ways, in terms of like understanding that we're not just an individual who gets to do everything that they want to do, but we're part of a larger society, and that we need to take care of ourselves as part of a larger society. And so using our relationships to food as a way to express that, as a way to support that, to cultivate a taste that is about how we share in relationship, I think is key to rethinking our notion of what's a good life, and learning from others who are already living that notion of a good life, right? We have exemplars of what it means to live that way. And so listening and allowing them to show us the way is really important.
You can maybe build upon that as well. So I love complexity, and I think this is probably one of the most complex subjects we can talk about. And I think about it from both the production side and ultimately from the consumer side. So a lot of these discussions about what food is for you depends on where we find you. If you are food insecure, your conversation about food is very, very different than if you're ultimately in a privileged position and where you get to choose between different foods. Very, very different. For lots of individuals, food is their means to earn a living. And for others then to say, but you can no longer do that because what you're producing or ultimately contributing to consumption is bad for either health or for environmental health, that is complex as well. So it's this interdependency that makes it so incredibly difficult. And I think a lot of times when we talk about a concept like food, we're showing up with our own starting point. And while we talk about the same element, food, we have all these parallel conversations and with our own perspectives as well. I understand that if you think about the highest level, things have to change. And I think we can all agree to that. But when you say, but change has to start with you, then it becomes really, really personal. And are you in a position to change, or is it really a function of, well, I can change my diet because I might have the means, but somebody else might not have that opportunity. And how do you deal with that? So food to me is so incredibly personal, both on how you consume and the impact of what it might have for you in how you earn a living. and the broader impact through society.
Thank you so much, Michael. I think that's such an important point to make, that we're all, with everyone's different level of privilege, we're coming at this issue from a different starting point, and I think that's really important to highlight. I'd love to actually continue and ask you another question about what your food, kind of your philosophy of food is, and what you think is of good taste, and how has that adapted over time?
So I always make a distinction between what you want and what you need. You know, I need more vegetables, but I want ice cream. And I think that is just how it works. You know, we just like specific foods because it evokes all kinds of triggers in our system. So good food to me can be what you consume with others. It's the experience. It's what brings you together. That would be one definition. But good food can be as well something that evokes memories. So something that reminds you of what it was, time with your mom, or time with good friends. Or it can actually be something that's going to help you to perform at a higher level. If you're a sporter, good food might actually mean what you need in order to continue to perform or to recover. So it's so contextually, so I don't have a clear definition for it.
I mean, I think that's a great answer, and I think it kind of gives somewhat of a definition by not giving a definition. So thank you. Actually, my follow-up question is again to you, Michael. Can you tell us about the philosophy behind programs like Google Food Lab, and how they are contributing to a more sustainable food future?
So maybe a little bit for the audience. The Food Lab at Google is a convening of thought leaders, change agents in the broader world of food. So we get together twice a year to think about from what can we do together to make a positive impact in the world of food. And that is as broad as you can define it. And what we're doing is we're finding people who believe in big food, small food, and anywhere in between. And what we're trying to do is to create what I would call a safe space for people to have conversation and to challenge your core beliefs. Because I think it's one of our opportunities to learn and listen more to each other and find common ground. And what I believe is that when you bring action-oriented individuals together with good food, good meals, good stuff will happen. And it's really based on this notion of casual collisions, is where you create an environment and you enable people, invite people to have conversations and to learn more about each other's. Friendships are going to be formed. And I think part of that you can see in this documentary, where a variety of actually partners came together through this convening. So I see the Food Lab as basically an enablement platform, is where all of us, including myself, got and continues to be challenged about your core assumptions. But that's what the Food Lab is all about, Natalie.
Thank you. To kind of continue on this line of thinking and the actors in this space, Safa, I'd love for you to talk about who are the knowledge keepers we should be looking to advise our food system.
Yeah, so this has been also mentioned. So I'm going to take this opportunity to really emphasize it, to emphasize, that indigenous peoples and local communities have discovered, they have protected, they have domesticated, they have bred, they have nurtured like the many food species which feeds the world. And they've done this in a way that is much kinder to the earth than have like industrial agricultural systems. They use much less land, much less water, much less fossil fuels. And there is so much wisdom to be learned from the food systems of indigenous peoples and local communities. And so much to be gained by kind of investing in the revitalization of these food systems, which are unfortunately, being threatened by so many different factors. Maybe just to kind of share an example, here in the Philippines, my father's hometown is a small municipality called Basao in Mountain Province. And it's a small indigenous community where indigenous culture is very much alive, but kind of still alongside many more colonial and more modern institutions. And in Busau, in this town, like the food ethic is very mindful. They make sure that nothing is wasted, that food is healthy, that food is clean, and it's good enough to share with the community, and to be offered to like the ancestors who guide us, right? And just to share like one dish, we have this dish called tongba, which is made from crabs, from salt, and from rice. And in the past, tongba really helped people cope with lack of food, during hard times, because you can just find the ingredients kind of around. And also like uh, th- with this dish, when a child is born, um, people prepare it for the nursing mom because it's said to kind of promote milk production. And like you can see that food is very much connected to like the community well-being, as all all food kind of should be. And so yeah, it's connected to the well-being of the community and the well-being of the land, and that's something we can learn from indigenous peoples and local communities and their our philosophy with regards to like food.
Thank you, Safa. And kind of jumping off of that, and this is a bit of a big question, how do we design a more diverse food system?
I think that, look, how do we redesign a more diverse food system? And for me, I'm really inspired by the work that's actually happening in Colombia. So there's a company called Crepes and Waffles, which provides crepes and waffles, and they've collaborated with the Universidad de los Andes and with other NGOs to basically bring biodiversity to the farming communities in the area of Montes de Maria, which is sort of the mountain area of Colombia. And for me, it was when I 2 years ago, before COVID, I had the opportunity to visit, and it was a perfect example of how do you take something as complex as redesigning the food system and begin to do it. And they began to do it in a couple of ways. First, they made it about preparing the farmers, right, to make the change, right? So there was projects of education, there was projects of understanding what it is that they have grown before, what it is that they would prefer to grow, how is, again, what is they grow tied to culture. And that was a lot of the work that was done to understand that if change is going to happen, it has to happen at the local level of those who are growing the food. But they need to grow the food for someone, right? And this is where, again, a company like Crepes and Waffles comes into play, because they then, first of all, they provide the distribution system in the sense of like they have the trucks that is able to pick up the food and bring it to the stores, but they also provide the taste, right? That they use those ingredients and in the foods that they prepare, which again begins to change the taste of the consumers who what they've done is they shift the growing of things that are sort of local and respects the biodiversity of that particular mountain area. So they've, again, and this is where the chefs get involved in the sense of figuring out how do we use these ingredients to create new tastes that people will enjoy. And then again, provides this sense of a pipeline, right? Of food that is grown sustainably. That isn't, again, it's the farmers who train the other farmers. So that's how you begin to spread the ideas. There's a business that needs to participate because you need to, again, have a market for the food to be able to go and be used. So it's not wasted, right? That it's sustainable. But then again, within this context of the restaurant, you are redefining the taste of the Colombian people. Which then allows those new tastes to grow and become part of culture, right? Become part of an old culture in the sense that many of the plants were reintroduced, right? Reintroduced into to the land. but also new cultures in the way in which they've been brought together and introduced to a new market, who again, when they think of crepes and waffles, are thinking perhaps Europe, not necessarily thinking of the foods that are being grown by these farmers who, again, done sustainably, done with optimizing biodiversity, not just in terms of the crops, but in the animals and how the whole land supports that new system. And so when people ask, like, how do you redesign in many ways a sort of biodiverse ecosystem, I think of the work that's being done in, Colombia through sort of crepes and waffles and the university and the communities in and of themselves around creating a whole new system for food that cultivates a new taste and again cultivates a new sense of what is a good life, right?
I'd love to kind of address this to everyone. What are the ingredients of behavior change, and how can we educate individuals, people, and society to make better choices? And Michael, yeah.
Yeah. So I can just speak maybe to my broader ecosystem. So on a day-to-day basis, the team and I are responsible for providing actually food experiences to those who work for our organization. So the question is, how do you help your workforce to make better food choices? And that's really, really hard. So what we actually have learned that it starts with the product needs to be tasty to start with. So it's really about taste. And obviously that's why we're here today as well. The product that does not taste great does not get eaten over time. When I get the question, but too many of yummy tasting products can lead to both excess, all kinds of challenges as well. So I've learned is that it is about the product, it is about the context, and then behavioral economics truly plays a role. Whatever you see first probably gets on a plate first. So sequence of truly makes a difference. The smell. The third one would truly be messaging and thinking through how and when do you engage a user with the product. If you're hungry, it's probably not a good time for you to go shopping because you're just going to make bad decisions. So you have to find people in the moment, for the moment, with just the right stuff. But at the end of the day, a good product, thoughtfully presented with the right message at the right moment, can truly make a difference. And just give you a good, maybe a last very practical example. So we believe in choice. So we don't want to be a paternalistic organization that tells you what you can and cannot have. But we do believe that drinking water is, for example, better than drinking soda all the time. So in our coolers at eye level, we make water available, the diet drinks, and then ultimately the fully sugared sodas. You can choose to bend over and pick up what you want, but we make the better choice, the convenient choice. And it doesn't matter that you tell people the trick we're playing, because the 250 food choices you make as of today are not being made intentionally. So many of the choices you just make, and you can help an individual to make better choices. That would be my answer, Natalie.
Thank you, Michael. And yes, yes, of course.
Yeah, I did want to provide a perspective on behavior change that's like very close to young people, which is education and having a transformative education. Like, I think we as young people and probably many others understand that education plays such a pivotal role in defining how we think and how we act in this world. But many young people really kind of lament that the education systems that we have in place now are not really there yet in terms of fostering a society that's responsible, that feels like we're part of nature, that knows our responsibility to kind of be stewards of nature, and also that fosters like a society that is very critical of like the systems that exist, and so yeah, we need education to make this transformation happen, but we need changes in our education systems of today. to make that happen, because we're not quite there yet. Like a lot of our education still is siloed in thinking between like nature and culture and things like this. Education still not accessible, it's not empowering and liberating, it's, you know, so these sometimes it's not fun, it doesn't prioritize the well-being of the students. So like this is a really big thing, and something that a lot of young people really care about in terms of behavior change, and behavior change that will really lead us to the future that is just and that is sustainable and peaceful and safe. Yeah.
And I guess I'll take it as, oh, so the more ingredients in terms of like the personal approach, since we talked about the systemic, really having a deep understanding of your own taste, where it comes from, who's influencing it, why it's being influenced, and whether or not those influences, I sort of say, speak to your soul's truth. Because again, one of the things that get talked about in the documentary is that there are taste makers who are telling you what you should be eating or should not be eating. And in design, we're definitely one of the main pushers and influencers of messages around like what is good taste. And so, but if you're grounded, I guess, in a sense of your own deep sense of who you are and the tastes that bring you joy, and not just pleasure, like, the ice cream might bring you pleasure, but having a fulfilling meal, right, that is balanced, that provides you, that might bring you joy, especially in the context of if you're able to share in that meal, because it brings you nourishment, right? The joy is in the nourishment that you receive. So understanding what brings you nourishment, not just in terms of the foods that you consume, but all of the things that you consume, right? All of the things that you buy, wear, share, read, watch, right? All those things that define the sense of your taste. That is where you kind of begin that transformation. And then once you have or in the process actually of having a core sense of who you are, what's the soul's truth of your taste, then sharing that with others is again how you nourish, right? How we nourish one another. And it doesn't have to be people, right? This is the important part. It doesn't have to be people. It can be with the water. It can be with the land. It could be with the air. It can be with animals. It can be with the plants that you're growing. And that, I think, is then how you begin to prepare yourself for the kinds of transformations that are needed, where we recognize our obligations to ourselves, to take care of ourselves, and also our obligations to others. And again, others are not just people, but all the things around us that we are connected to in order to survive and live and thrive and hopefully flourish.
So beautifully said. Thank you so much, Dory. I know we're running a little bit out of time, and I'd love to ask one final question to all of you, actually. So what are some actions that you would like the audience to kind of take away from this conversation? And I guess maybe some final remarks on what the audience can do in their next steps as they kind of leave this conversation and after they watch the documentary as well.
I'll go first. 2 thoughts. 1, embrace the diversity of thought. There are so many things that come to bear over here. Be open and accept that your point of view might be one of many, and that another point of view might be just as great, if not better than yours. I think that is one. The other one is do something today. It is overwhelmingly complex. That paralyzes people, but all of us can make a difference. A choice today, and each choice does matter.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, very similar to what Michael just said. I want to connect this to a campaign that we're doing as the Global Youth Biodiversity Network for Cultural Diversity Day and for Biodiversity Day tomorrow, which is, I, yes, very similar, and it goes like same sucks or and diversity rocks. And it's, I think this is something you can really kind of take home, like having the same very profit-driven values, the same monocultures, the same destructive practices. This is all causing a lot of yeah, it's causing, it's detrimental to our nature and to our culture. But celebrating and revitalizing the diversity that is there is really the antidote to all of this sameness. Diversity of what we consider a good life, diversity in taste, diversity in thought. Yeah, exactly as Michael said. And yeah, we have to embrace this diversity and stop the sameness, because yeah. That's
you.
probably also something you'll hear later on.
And I guess the final word for me is seek nourishment. Go and seek nourishment. And in this is, reading about taste and diversity of taste so that your mind is opened, understanding your own taste and how and what nourishes you and doesn't nourish you. And sharing that nourishment with others, which is what the documentary is about. And that, again, cultivates that diversity of thought and taste and action, right? Because we all take many different actions in terms of how we build a world of both cultural and social and environmental diversity. And that is what is required for us to be able to adapt and survive.
Thank you. So I think it's actually time for us to share the link to the documentary, but I want to say thank you for each one of you for your time and your insights. I know I learned a lot today from this conversation. Before sharing the instructions to access the documentary, I would like to call the audience to register for the final session of the virtual World Biodiversity Forum, which is next Thursday, May 27th, where we will discuss positive futures for biodiversity. And I believe we've shared the link in the chat to register. And now, with great excitement, we can kind of share the documentary screening link. We're linking to the site to view the documentary in the chat, as well as a backup site in case there are too many viewers on the first link. So we will be closing the Zoom session in order to allow everyone to enjoy the film. So please copy both links from the chat. We will also share these links in the World Biodiversity Forum group on LinkedIn. So if you haven't joined that group, I suggest you do. It's really great, and there's wonderful conversations around biodiversity. Also, a lot of the questions that the audience asked here are addressed in the documentary and can also be addressed in the World Biodiversity Forum group on LinkedIn as well. Thank you everyone for participating in the chat, and unfortunately we've run out of time and won't be able to address them here, but they are addressed when you watch the documentary. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it from me. Thank you so much, and I'm very excited for everyone to be able to watch this documentary that Carly and I and the rest of the team, Ezgi, Lana, Garrett, Maddie, have been working on. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Be well.